Well, it was a set of very strange circumstances because I wanted to be a sound engineer because I thought after being, I used to do the DJing at school and everything. I thought, well, I didn't want to actually be in a band. I wanted to actually make the records. And initially I thought that was being an engineer rather than being a producer because I didn't really fully understand the role of a producer. In fact, people still don't understand it today. But so I thought, well, if I start as a sound engineer, I'll work my way through. And then it was just a question, unfortunately, in when I was at school, I left school in 1975, there weren't the fabulous courses that you can now do at university, which I would have done had they been available. So I decided to just go and knock on the doors of various studios. So I got a list of all the studios in London and then literally said, I'm here for a job. And then a set of very strange coincidences. I went to CBS Studios. They had a vacancy. And then the strangest coincidence, my parents had a market in Canterbury. And the lady next door sold eggs, and we'd only ever known her as the egg lady. And when I was talking to her about it, she said, well, that's really odd. My son works for a recording studio. I didn't know you were interested in this. And it turns out her son was Mike Ross, who's actually a very, very famous classical engineer who works for CBS. And he said, well, why don't you come for another interview? So I met with Mike. And I was very fortunate because I was taken under his wing as his assistant, which meant that I learnt a quality of recording of such a high caliber. I mean, Mike is still one of the most sought after engineers in virtually every major Hollywood film where the music has been recorded in England. If you look at the credits at the end, you'll see Mike Ross as his credit. He's still a very sought after engineer and specialising now in that sort of thing.
I mentioned all the punk stuff that you were involved with in the early days of your career, and I mentioned some of the other famous names from Davy Grant, Honeyz, of course, China Crisis, and many others. Even the Kingsingers.
That was a very exciting one because the Kingsingers came to me because Bruce Johnston from the Beach Boys was producing half the record, and he said to me, he phoned me and said, Steve, do you want to do the other half? He said, I really can't do the whole thing. And this would be really interesting because one of the things they wanted was to try and get contemporary vocals on a pop-based album. And I said, fantastic. And it was very interesting working because I'd never worked with classical singers before, but I was working with them in a contemporary fashion. And they were just such lovely people to work with. And in fact, the album was nominated for a Grammy when it was released. It hardly saw the light of day outside of America because, in fact, in America, they are quite a big deal. And so for myself and Bruce, it was a fantastic project to work on. It was very different to anything else that I've actually done. A lot of it is like being a politician. You're working with the different temperaments within the band. You need to find out what it is they really want. I think a mark of a good producer is that as you list those credits I've worked on, there's not really a similarity between them. I don't have a Steve Levine sound, and yet they're all artists that I really enjoyed working with and that I've kept up a relationship with since. So I think that's what I bring to a recording session, trying to get some understanding of what they want and then help them with the musical or technical issues that they're bound to come up against.
Thank you so much for listening to this interview. If you enjoyed it, please click on the like button and ring that notification bell. And there are many, many more to listen to on this channel, so make sure you subscribe if you possibly can. Thank you.